Today we're going to talk about how to never get cancer. Then I'm going to give you 30 scientifically proven tips. And the big problem with cancer is the conventional model of cancer, I believe, is not correct. Over 70 years of doing research on cancer, I'm talking trillions of dollars. The 5-year survival rates have not budged. And also there's not a lot of enthusiasm funding alternative research other than if it's chemo, radiation, or surgery. Now that's a big problem, especially if you're trying to avoid or prevent cancer. To be able to prevent cancer, you have to really understand cancer and exactly what it is, because the medical model says that cancer is a mutation. It's a spontaneous mutation of your DNA, and that basically means some alteration or change in the blueprints of your cells. Then the solution is to kill those cells and destroy those cells with chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. And that's pretty much the model of what the conventional viewpoint of cancer is. So that's conventional over here, okay? Let's take a look at another viewpoint on cancer, the metabolic viewpoint on cancer. And so in that model, you don't first have a genetic mutation. Instead, you first have damage to the mitochondria. That's the little energy factories in the cell as the first thing that happens. And then you might get a mutation down the road over here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you the foundation behind cancer of what it is, because if we don't really understand the foundation of it, all of these recommendations are not going to work because it's based on the wrong problem. What is a cancer cell? It's a cell that has lost its ability for the mitochondria to work correctly. The cancer cell has hijacked it. One really important thing about the mitochondria is that it needs oxygen to work. But with cancer, it can live without oxygen. And if we go back in history and look at the primary driver of what's really going on, the purpose of this whole thing is that these cells are just trying to survive. And they had to survive in different environments. In relationship to oxygen, they actually created a plan B. They created this other system of getting energy, and that's called fermentation. And this is why when they diagnose cancer and they try to evaluate it, they use what's called a PET scan. A PET scan is looking for areas in the body where there's this hypermetabolism of glucose, and it kind of lights right up because this cancer cell is fermenting like crazy, and it's hogging all of this sugar like a huge vacuum cleaner, just trying to suck all this sugar to try to get energy. It's trying to survive. And so then the PET scan is scanning the body to see what areas are in this hyper metabolism of glucose or fermentation. First, you're going to get damage in the mitochondrial cells in a certain organ, okay? So let's say, for example, you're a smoker and you have smoked for many years and all the smoke is going into your lungs. And then one day you get a virus, you get pneumonia. Pneumonia now is acting like a spark. So now you develop lung cancer. Another big trigger could be low amounts of vitamin D, since vitamin D is like the master regulator of the immune system. And then you let your vitamin D drop too low. Now that could be the trigger to colon cancer. So now let's go through the things that you can do to actually avoid cancer, okay? Let's start with number one, vitamin D. And it's very important in controlling your entire immune system. There are a couple different cells, actually there's quite a few different cells in your immune system that directly target cancer cells. There's some great data that shows that in order to shrink tumors, you need to get your vitamin D blood levels above 90. But I would keep your vitamin D levels between 60 and 80 at the very minimum. That way we can keep enough immune support, because conventionally what they're doing is they're using chemo and radiation, and they're also killing off your immune system. But if you kill off the immune system at the same time, what then is going to prevent it from coming back? Because there's always a small amount of cancer cells that survive the chemo. We really need to maintain a strong immune system with vitamin D, okay? Number two, cold therapy. We're adding a stress to the body that forces our body to make a lot more mitochondria. Just think about what happens when you go into this cold immersion tank or you take a cold shower. Your body has to maintain 98.6. You just got into a cold tank. It's 50 degrees or 40 degrees. It's freezing. What does your body have to do to maintain that temperature? It has to cause that mitochondria just to work like crazy, not to make energy, but just to make heat to counter that. So it's a massive stress on your mitochondria that then causes the mitochondria to adapt and become stronger. Intermittent fasting is probably the most important way to prevent cancer. And I'm talking about 2 meals a day, 1 meal a day. You go maybe once a month, 3 days, or even 5 days of no eating. If we're talking about damaged mitochondria being at the heart of this problem, then you would want to clean up all the damaged mitochondria. The best way to do it is through a condition called autophagy, which is a condition where your body is recycling old damaged cells and cell parts and mitochondria and turning those into new ones. So this is super therapeutic to constantly generate new mitochondria, and it's one of the best ways to prevent cancer, especially since cancer originates at the mitochondria. Number 4, if you're grilling steak or meat on the grill, that charring of the meat and the fat is carcinogenic to a certain degree. But if you add some herbs, garlic, thyme, sage, or even onions, you just countered that carcinogenic effect. And this is just a real simple thing to do because these herbs have all sorts of plant-based chemicals that protect you against cancer, but they also support the mitochondria. Number 5, if you're getting a CAT scan or x-rays, you're getting radiation, something called ionized radiation. I used to be an x-ray tech. I used to do portable x-rays at nursing homes for many years, and I never wore a lead shield. I was exposed a lot to radiation. I was stupid. I should have done that. I've had just a ton of dental x-rays. I've had a lot of CAT scans because I had kidney stones long ago. So I have had a lot of radiation, which is something that can actually damage your mitochondria, right? Maybe request not to get an x-ray so frequently. And if you do get an x-ray, make sure you shield that thyroid. And also, if you're going to get a CAT scan, see if they can do an MRI or an ultrasound just to reduce the radiation. Okay, next point here is folate. When you have a folate deficiency, it's very similar to being exposed by radiation as far as the damage on your DNA. So just make sure you have enough folate. You can get folate from dark leafy green vegetables, or even liver has folate. Number 7, methylene blue. It's one of the first drugs that was ever created. It's actually a dye. It's made synthetically from petroleum, but it does some really interesting things to your mitochondria. The pigment in this methylene blue helps to absorb some of the free radicals from the electrons that are being generated in the mitochondria, and it protects you. Kind of take it in an intermittent way. And this is true for a lot of different therapies, whether you're doing intermittent fasting or intermittent cold therapy, because if it's adding a little bit of stress to the body, then you can pull back and let the body recover. It's just a better way to take things, including the methylene blue. Number 8, prolonged fasting. Prolonged fasting is probably the most powerful out of any of these things right here. In fact, if you had cancer, especially if you had like a stage 4 cancer that it's spreading and it's like serious, like the only thing you can really do at that point is prolonged fasting. And I'm talking fasting for 20, 30 or more days in a row. The problem with that is that you might be very, very thin and fragile and old. And the point is that you might not be able to survive that. So you'd want to do what you can do and then pull back, kind of go back to eating and then do fasting. But it's not just prolonged fasting you're going to do if you had cancer. You would layer it on different herbal remedies. But I just wanted to kind of put more attention on prolonged fasting right here. Number 9, the ketogenic diet, low carb. Why? Because what the keto diet does is it helps to correct insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is probably one of the biggest things that destroys the mitochondria. We're trying to make insulin more sensitive and stabilize the blood sugar so then the mitochondria can heal and you can run on ketones, which actually are very therapeutic to the mitochondria. Always do the healthy version of the ketogenic diet. Number 10, avoid snacking. Well, that probably would be covered in this intermittent fasting, but I just wanted to make another point about snacking, of what that's going to do. I would say out of all the things that a person could do that actually ends up creating insulin resistance, yes, carbohydrates, but it's also the frequency of eating. I think you should eat based on how much energy you really need. And so this really is an individual thing, but it's going to protect the mitochondria if you just give it the fuel it needs and then make sure you exercise at the level you need to use that fuel and not go crazy and overdo it. Next one right here is omega-3 fatty acids. That would be like cod liver oil or fish oil. This is very important to prevent inflammation because if you're doing a lot of seed oils with omega-6, they're highly inflammatory. So you're just flooding the body with inflammation. And like I said before, cancer migrates into areas of inflammation. Number 12, sulforaphane. This is a compound that helps detoxification, getting rid of poisons in your liver. So sulforaphane is super powerful to do that. And you can get a lot of this from broccoli sprouts or even radishes or even cabbage. Any of the cruciferous vegetables will have this, but broccoli sprouts are at the top of the list. 13, iron. Cancer cells will use iron to multiply a lot faster. They like iron. And so if you're taking iron supplements, not good. If you're cooking in an iron skillet, not a good idea. You never want to take an iron supplement because too much iron creates a lot of inflammation in the liver and the joints, and we have a hard time getting rid of it. Number 14, selenium. This is the trace mineral. You don't need a lot, but that helps you get rid of hydrogen peroxide in your body, which can create damaged tissues. It's also important in certain parts of the immune system, also to help build up antioxidants like glutathione. So selenium is in shellfish and Brazil nuts. So that can help you. Number 15 is magnesium. You cannot make energy without magnesium. And the mitochondria depends on magnesium, so it's super important. So having enough magnesium from leafy greens, pumpkin seeds, and even avocados. It's kind of hard to get magnesium from the diet. I take it as a supplement, and I have the powder. I dissolve it. I take it in the evenings before bed. The hallmark symptoms, which is the leg cramps and the toes that cramp, they also can create restless legs and a lot of other issues. But anything muscle spasm, you need magnesium. 16 is something called NAD. This really is something in the mitochondria that helps in the extraction of energy from the food. And the precursor for this is niacin B3. So as we age, we get less NAD. And a lot of people take B3 for cholesterol, but it's just another key nutrient that can support the energy production in your mitochondria. If you're going to take B3, I recommend you take the one that gives the flushing, but don't take a lot at first because it might scare you because you're just going to have this huge flushing reaction. Just take maybe 50 milligrams to start off and just see how you do with that. I feel much better when I take B3. Number 17, colostrum is one of the best things to do if your immune system is damaged from like a lot of antibiotics or prednisone. I had a lot of antibiotics myself and a lot of prednisone. So there was one point where I was on colostrum. It's a great thing for the immune system because colostrum is like in the first part of milk. And you have probiotics, you have all the immune factors. You literally have your mom's immune system in that colostrum. And it's in the first few days of the breast milk. But if you haven't been breastfed, you might have some weaknesses within your immune system. So you want to get it from an animal. And you can take some in a powder or pills. And it can help support your immune system, which is indirectly going to help reduce the risk of cancer. Number 18 is AHCC. And the reason I bring this up, it's a very interesting remedy for certain viruses, herpes, but it also is a potent trigger for a certain immune cell in your body called the natural killer cell, which has two jobs. One is to kill viruses, and number two is to kill cancer. And since we're talking about the natural killer cell, we have to talk about beta-glucans, very potent trigger of the natural killer cells. And you can get this from certain mushrooms. The reishi mushroom, very potent, and the shiitake mushroom are loaded with beta-glucans, and they can greatly help your immune system, specifically the natural killer cells, that go after cancer. And then we get to pomegranate. Pomegranate is fascinating. It has a compound that really reduces inflammation, which can then help the mitochondria and also inhibit the spread of cancer. Chamomile tea has a very interesting compound called apigenin, which decreases a certain cell called CD38, okay? CD38, which helps preserve this NAD in your mitochondria, which is that thing that extracts energy from the cells. All you really need to know is chamomile tea is good for the mitochondria. Now, 22 is a water filter. This is really important since our water is so toxic. Out of all the things that you should probably invest in is some good water filter for drinking, the most important, and maybe in your shower, just because we're swimming in a sea of toxicity, unfortunately. All right, number 23 is forest breathing. What is that? It's walking through a forest where there's pine trees. The pine trees give off this certain vapor that actually improves our immune system. It actually increases that killer T cell that can help kill cancer as well. It's very therapeutic too, just from reducing stress, getting more oxygen. I always feel really good when I walk through a forest. Let's talk about green tea. Green tea has something in it decreasing what's called angiogenesis, which means the cancer cell is like hijacking and trying to get blood flow and resources by developing new capillaries in the vascular system. Well, green tea actually inhibits that process.